This is your before and after story, where your first steps towards a new life-changing career begin. Southeastern College can take you there. We offer in-demand hybrid and online programs with hands-on training, led by in-field career professionals, and career services to put you on the path to a rewarding and fulfilling future. This is where your transformation begins. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, warm up, hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got ourselves a great podcast as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Riley Davis. He does great work over at eCheck CBB, does amazing work over at Sleepers Media. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've seen here in the ACC in the offseason, the coaching moves that have been made to be able to elevate the conference. He is a man that is out there in the great state of North Carolina. I know that he's a North Carolina fan, so we have to take a look at the Tar Heels, what they've been able to do out there. If there might be a little bit of promise for those lesser teams in the ACC because they have been very much dragging down the conference. So we're going to be chatting about that and so much more. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, they mean does not matter. So per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is brought to you by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost, they're making sure that bettors are able to access their funds 24/7, 365 on leap years, 366 days out of the year, as gambling-related transactions are always approved over there at EdgeBoost. You get cashback rewards, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize the promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll get you a dollar-for-dollar match on your first deposit of up to $25. And now, let's dive in with our good friend Riley. It is great to have you aboard, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Good to be on, Greg. I'm happy to talk a little bit of hoops with you and talk about the ACC, talk about my Tar Heels. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. First things first, let's dive in on North Carolina because obviously some moving parts from what we saw last season. RJ Davis had about 100 billion years of eligibility over at North Carolina, so we were seeing a little bit of a passing of the torch there. But how would you say things have gone for North Carolina this offseason? Because undoubtedly they lose a few guys. That is going to be a little bit rough, especially with the fact that you do lose much of that backcourt from a season ago. But I feel like this team is getting back to the roots after last season. Uncharacteristically rough on the glass for them.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway is this appears to be a team that will lean on its front court this year. I mean, when you look at Caleb Wilson coming in, the top 10 recruit out of Atlanta who played at Holy Innocents, and they're pairing him with Henry Vasar, who they got from Arizona, where should be a complete reversal of last season where the weakness was at that 4-5 spot, even more so down the stretch. I would say the 4 spot was really, you never knew what you were going to get out of it with just Jalen Withers, who's like a mercurial player, to put it nicely, and Drake Powell playing out of position in stretches there. I think he, wasn't necessarily played or utilized to the best of his strengths, to where now you get a true 4 in Wilson and a true 5 with like a 7-footer with a plus 7-foot wingspan who's coming off this breakout year at Arizona where we saw him become this awesome rim protector who can also make plays out of the short roll on offense, can pass. Like, I think those two are really who you look to for offense. And even, I think Caleb Wilson can handle enough to run a little 2-man game with Vasar to, I would say, compensate for the question marks in the backcourt. Because, yeah, you mentioned transferring from RJ Davis's leadership and him being the prime offensive initiator. It's really this Kyan Evans and Seth Trimble backcourt with both those guys. I'm a fan of them individually. And I even think as a pairing it can work out well, but I just would say both have question marks, just a lot to prove in terms of can either of them be an alpha. I think Evans will be the one more tasked with running the offense, but what exactly does that look like? It's honestly going to make the presence of Wilson and Vasar that much more important.
And I think that's interesting that you bring up Evans and company. How much do you take a look at what the Tar Heels did in the offseason and just look at these guys and think maybe these are going to be, shall we say, multiple year projects, because I do think that while Evans was rock solid over at Colorado State, it might take him a year or two to get acclimated to the ACC. And personally, I've been noticing the guys that have the most success in the transfer portal are typically those guys that they need that season number 2, season number 3 in a program.
Yeah, I think that's spot on with Evans in that assessment, where I'm curious to see what he can do this year. I mean, hopefully he averages more than 10 points a game. I know that was his output at Colorado State, which seemingly was a big jump. But yeah, just watching him at CSU a lot, I know he benefited from playing next to Nick Clifford, who took on most of the creation responsibility in that offense, was just like this awesome point wing who could really do it all. And Evans was able to pick his spots a little bit more, be a knockdown spot up shooter who could do some stuff on the move, can do some stuff off the bounce as well. If you go back to the NCAA tournament game against Memphis, where he hit 6 3-pointers, I think he scored a career high 23 points. I remember whoever was on the call for that game kept harping in on him being like him stepping into the starting point guard role, him learning from Isaiah Stevens, to where that to me, like you look at the CSU program that had such a high reputation for development under Nico Medved. Could Evans have like a John Tanji like breakout in a new environment, just getting more opportunity? I don't think he'll be an All-American like Tanji was this past year. I don't think the scoring output will be like that, but I am curious to see like how much more can he show as like the go-to guy in the backcourt, like the one who is going to have the ball in his hands more. Conversely, I would say devil's advocate side is like, under Nico at Colorado State, they ran this motion-heavy scheme that's like just a really aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball, and that's not really the style that Hubert and co played, especially this past year. Like a lot of times UNC might have ran their primary action, and when it was snuffed out, there wasn't the best counters, and it resulted in a lot of one-on-one isolation ball. They don't have ISO type players this year. There's no RJ Davis. There's no Ian Jackson. If it gets down to that, there needs to be like a safety net or a second option to go to. So yeah, Evans, I think it'll be interesting to see like what leaves Evans can make as the primary guard in the backcourt. It'll be interesting to see like schematic shifts that Hubert and his staff might institute. But yeah, those are, I would say, like simultaneously like the upside, but also like the question marks behind this backcourt as well.
Yep, no question about it. I think that North Carolina is going to be such an interesting team this season, as Riley Davis, who does such amazing work over at Heat Check CBB, he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Riley, I do think that it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we're going to be getting moving forward out of the entirety of the ACC, because I think what has really plagued the conference is the fact that there's been a coaching overhaul with all these legends stepping down. But I feel like this offseason, they finally got it right. There have been a few, let's call it not great hires out there in the ACC. I'm looking at you, Kenny Payne. But that said, how do you take a look at the entirety of the ACC? Because I think that's going to take multiple off seasons for this conference to really return to prominence. But I felt like this off season was a step in the right direction.
I'm with you on there. I honestly think like Will Wade's presence is huge. There's part of me that's like, how long does he actually stay at NC State? I would assume an SEC school will come calling eventually, that he would take a bigger paycheck, a higher profile job. But I've been a big fan of some of their moves. I think Quadir Copeland, Trey Holloman, really easy to see the vision there in their backcourt with the two of them. And Matthew Abel, a true bucket getter as well. Terrence Arsenault, one-time top 50 recruit. Maybe there's still a little bit of upside there that's untapped. And I think retaining Paul McNeil was a sneakily huge move, because that kid is just an absolute bucket getter who was, for some reason, chained to the bench under Kevin Keatts. And whenever he was on the court, he produced. You can look at him. You can look at Miami with Jay Lucas. Always have some skepticism with first-time head coaches, but I do like a lot of what he's done with the roster, with getting in a proven point guard and Trey Donaldson, who, definitely has some shortcomings. I don't always trust him to get his teammates involved, like in a true point guard way necessarily, but I would say can be a capable lead guard. Getting Sheldon Henderson to decommit from Duke and come along, like you get a dude who was a McDonald's All-American, defensive-minded, power wing. And then that front court of Malik Renew and Ernest Uday, I would say it's solid, if not spectacular, but both of those guys have sort of shown flashes throughout their careers and have never put it all together, which, maybe you don't bank on that happening as seniors, but I still think there's like the flashes there are enough to at least be exciting and to not be whatever Miami was last year, like a 7-win team, will be a breath of fresh air for sure.
Yeah, and you're relying upon teams like Miami, Florida State to be able to get back to the NCAA tournament. It's been a little bit of a rough go of it for them. And then I think that out of all the teams in the ACC, the most interesting offseason, not NC State, because NC State with Will Wade, obviously number one, but I just look at this Virginia program after it was so bad last season. And it's interesting now that they probably aren't going to be in the bottom five in terms of total possessions per game, adding in their Malik Thomas and company. I think that they are, shall we say, perhaps the biggest wild card right now in the ACC, because I think that there's a lot of upside with them.
I think you're spot on. Virginia is a top 3 team for me right now. I got it Louisville, Duke, Virginia as my top. Like Louisville, Duke are in a tier of their own, but I'm a big Ryan Odom guy. I think he will turn it around immediately. I think he's one of those coaches that even some conference foes, they might be slow to adjust to him. You know, you see that from time to time in these power conferences. A new coach comes in, play a different style or whatever, and it takes opponents longer to adjust. But I love the moves with Jakari White and Malik Thomas. Just like 2 absolute bucket getters that there's no player like that who's been on Virginia in feels like 3 or 4 years. Love the 2 Euros they got in the front court with Johan Grunlow from Germany. I don't know if it's official that they got Thie de Ritter from Belgium. He was someone who I feel like I've seen it throughout Twitter. That's like, oh yeah, he's expected to sign with Virginia. Maybe he's not fully on board yet, but it's expected to happen. I think that's just a versatile pairing between those two. And then even having guys like Devin Tillis and Ugana and Yenzo off the bench in that front court, there's just a lot of pieces to like. And I would even say with what Odom's done with his staff, like being able to get Griff Aldrich to come over from Longwood, a school where he's made 2 NCAA tournaments, to leave that job to be an associate head coach, like that's a great hire to me, to where it's a good staff that I trust a lot. And with the pieces they've done, I think they have the financial backing to sustain it. Like Virginia, to me, is in a really good spot going forward.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that they're an amazing spot moving forward. And I mean, Tony Bennett did such a great job of being able to build that program up. Obviously, it felt like the game perhaps passed him by just a little bit in the last few years, but now the program, I feel like, is in very good hands with his father, Mr. Odom. He was quite good out there in the ACC as well, and just the entirety of the conference, I think, is going to be very much hinging, though, on what some of these lower/middle tier teams are going to be doing as well, because I think that you'd agree with this. What has really killed the ACC over the last few years is that the bottom teams have been so bad, and how do you take a look at, shall we say, some of the dregs like a Boston College? I think that Cal is one of those teams that it would be fair to put them there, though I do think that they're going to be able to get things turned around sooner rather than later with Coach Madsen over there. I think that that's a very good hire that they made a few seasons ago, but I think that the ACC is very much going to ride or die there, because those bad losses have really added up for those bubble teams the last few years.
For real. It's tough for me to see any of them really being that much better other than like Notre Dame. When I'm thinking in tiers right now, I would say, Duke, Virginia, Louisville, Miami, UNC, Clemson should all be tournament teams. Maybe Miami doesn't get there, but they're at least on the bubble. I think Notre Dame has enough talent to at least be on the bubble, maybe finally get over the hump. We've seen the potential and the upside with Shrews. I think Shrews is an awesome coach. It's just, it seems like it's hard to get transfers into Notre Dame, at least on the basketball side of things, just with the academic requirements. You're just not seeing that many like true undergrad transfers come into that program right now. But I love the addition of Jalen Harrelson, and I think pairing him next to Braden Shrewsbury and Marcus Burton, that's a really, really good trio. I think Ryder Frost is another under the radar freshman who could have an impact this year, who kind of has some of that Braden Shrewsbury type 3-point shooting to his game. SMU and Wake, they'll probably do their bubble thing that they do every year and ultimately not make it. But I don't know, Greg. Like when I'm looking at the rest of the league, I just expect BC to stink again. I don't really see how Georgia Tech gets better, even though I'm a Damon Stoudemire believer. Like they got a really good players at the 4 and the 5, but just a ton of question marks beyond that. I haven't been enthused with like Luke Locke's moves so far with Florida State either. Syracuse to me is really intriguing because I think they have a good roster, but I just think like Red Autry's been really, really bad through 2 years. They haven't been competitive at all against good competition. They get blitzed by any team with a pulse in the non-conference, and they still carry on the tradition of either losing to Colgate or almost losing to Colgate every November. Like they're probably the next up in terms of most talented teams after the ones who I expect to be in the tournament, but it's just the coaching question marks really have me hesitant to expect anything from them.
Yeah, it is really hard to expect a whole heck of a lot out of them, and I think that that is going to be a little bit brutal as well. And I want to get your thoughts here because we've been taking a look at the ACC, we've dove in on that conference, but outside the ACC, are there a few teams nationally that you take a look at their offseason and you're feeling bullish about them, and maybe they're not getting the love that they deserve in the national media, but you think that they're going to be in for a good year?
Oh man, that's a good question. The first one that comes to mind is Arizona, that no one really seems to have them in the top 10, or if they're even in like the top 15, they're sort of this afterthought. I would say to me, it's a really good roster that's well balanced. On the off chance they get Carter Bryant to come back, fire top 10 team. But even without him, I just think the Jaden Bradley, Brandon Burries in the backcourt have good complementary skills. Anthony Delorso made some strides last year. I'm a huge Koa Pete believer as well, to where I think they have a lot of talent, and pretty much all Tommy Lloyd has done since he's been the coach at Arizona has been stacked together 1 and 2 seed seasons with a little 4 seed sprinkled in there too. So outside of them, maybe a little further down the line, Indiana, I don't think is getting enough buzz for the moves that they've made. Even with someone like Lamar Wilkerson, who was highly coveted in the portal, I think he should transfer immediately. They've assembled some like mid-major all-stars to where it could come back to bite them if they don't translate. But I just think Tate Connerway and Reed Bailey both fit what Darian DeVries wants to do, particularly Bailey. I think of the way that he used Imani Hansberry last year at West Virginia bodes very favorably for Bailey to be like a better version of that, like a front court guy who you can run the offense through, who has better athleticism and body control than I think most would assume with him being like a white dude from Davidson. So I like a lot of the moves that Indiana has made as well.
Yep, I do as well. And I think that the Big Ten in general, they got it right in terms of coaching hires as well. We talked about with the ACC, but I feel like out of all the conferences in their off seasons, I feel like the Big Ten is number one with the way that they were able to hire on those coaches and Darren DeVries, Nico Medved, and then obviously Iowa being able to upgrade as well with Ben McCollum. I thought that that was a home run for the conference.
Yeah, I'm with you completely on that. Yeah, DeVries is one of those dudes who doesn't sound like he was necessarily Indiana's first choice, but I think I don't know, man. It's always tough to say I think he's going to pan out there because Indiana has had terrible luck with coaches, but it seems like a good fit. And I've just been a fan of the move so far. McCollum feels perfect for Iowa as well. And Medved truly seems like as good of a coach as Minnesota should be able to get. So, yeah, it's a lot of good moves for the league as a whole this year.
A lot of good moves there, and a great move on this podcast, getting you aboard, Riley, because you do such an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. I know that you're hard at work being able to evaluate what we're getting here in the offseason, so let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I appreciate that. A lot of what I'm doing right now is with Sleepers Media. You can find us on YouTube, doing a ton of NBA draft content that's coming up. Then my written stuff is with Heat Check CBB, looking at doing some stock up, stock down for some of these teams post portal season. So you can find me on Twitter at Riley_Davis3. So we'd love for you to follow along.
Absolutely. And Riley doing an incredible job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. And it was great to get him aboard today. So big thanks to Riley for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, let's give you guys a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Everybody, good lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It was great to be able to get Riley Davis aboard. He does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball over there at Sleepers Media, also at Heat Check CBB. Big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours, and it has been very interesting to see what we've gotten on the mid-major front, as this is a pretty solid one. Oakland, they're going to be picking up Michael Hoagie. Now, Hoagie, not a guy that's necessarily going to give you a lot of three-point shooting, but over at Jacksonville State last year, 8.5 points, 7.5 boards. he should be able to do a really good job of helping out an Oakland team that they've been sort of refining their identity a little bit. For Oakland, for the longest time, this was a high-flying team that was really popping in and locking in from three-point range, and last year they really played through their forwards. Now, Hoagie, not necessarily a guy with just towering size or anything like that, but he should be able to fit exactly what they were doing a season ago with having Vari Nabarua and guys like that down low, so he should be able to do a solid job on that front. And for Oakland, it's been a little bit slow going for them in the transfer portal. This is traditionally a program that they look to a lot more of those Division II, Division III guys to be able to elevate them as well, so would not be surprised if they're going to be able to get a few guys in a little bit later on. As a matter of fact, Jack Golke, who may remember him, he came in from the non-D1 level, but that said, he's going to be pairing up with Brody Robinson, who comes on over from UT Arlington, so a pair of solid gets thus far for Oakland. And I do think that this is also going to be a very rock-solid get, as Mr. Christian Nichu, he was over at Florida State this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to Washington at 6'11". Just really wasn't able to see the floor too much this past season. He was only averaging about 2 points per contest, a little bit under 2 rebounds per game, but a guy with a nice frame, has a little bit of upside, and I really do like what I've seen out of Washington this offseason. They've done it much better than what we had seen in the previous offseason, where they threw a whole bunch of money over at Great Osabor and absolutely nobody else got paid. With Nitu, he was a guy that was a top 350 recruit. He's not necessarily a guy that you would expect to be like some sort of dynamo or anything like that, but that said, I do think that there's a little bit of upside here, and for this Washington team, the way that they have been able to build this roster just much better here in the offseason, as they brought in Kamari Peterson, who was a standout over at East Tennessee State. Jacob Agansevich, who comes on over from Lipscomb, he was a 19-plus point per game guy at 6'7", and is able to really shoot it from three-point range. Lathan Somerville should be playing instead in that starter's role rather than Nitu down low, but bringing back Wesley Yates is pretty solid as well. So I do like what this team has been able to do here in the offseason. This is a little bit more of a depth piece than anything else, but that said, you can always use depth pieces. You all know all too well about that. You never know when an injury is going to be popping up. Vashawn Elwood, he has decided that he is going to be going to UT San Antonio. Meet me for the Roadrunners. Roadrunners needed a little bit more defense, and Elwood should be able to help out on that front, as he last season over at TCU, 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. Not a guy that's necessarily going to light it up from three, as that was actually the specialty of UT Arlington a season ago. That was actually the specialty of UT San Antonio a season ago, but I do think that he's going to be able to go in there, help elevate this backcourt in general. Austin Clonch, I think, is a very rock-solid coach, and he should be able to utilize Elwood to the best of his abilities. Now, Elwood last year did shoot 22.2% from three-point range, so that was a little bit less than tremendous. They're going to need to get a little bit more out of him, but I mean, for this UTSA team, it has been one that has been able to do a nice job of hitting the portal just in the last few seasons. In general, last year, the fact that they were able to bring in the likes of DeMonte Monsanto and company was rock solid, and now they've got Bryce Johnson, who comes on over from UMBC, nice double-figure scorer. Austin Nunez is an upside guy from Arizona State as well, and Daniel Akintobi, he's going to be able to give this team a bit of something down low coming in from Oregon State. They're still going to leave something to be desired on the defensive front, but Elwood's certainly going to be able to help out with that, so I do like that pickup. I like this pickup as well. A true 7-footer, Abdul Fanta Kaba. He was over at Denver this last season, and he was averaging a little bit over a block, 4.5 boards, 4.5 points per game. He has decided that he is going to be going to Western Carolina. For Western Carolina, obviously a rough season number 1 for them under a new coaching regime, but I do think that season number 2 and beyond going to be a little bit better here. You can tell that they just got a slow start in the offseason, and they bring in Tajani Dumasi as well from Southern. He was a nice point guard for them before going down with injury. Justin Johnson, a little bit of a 6'7" do-it-all player from Arkansas State as well. So Western Carolina probably going to need to add a few more pieces, because that was a rough roster a season ago. That said, this is a step in the right direction. This should be able to give them a little bit more on the glass after they were really, really bad with regards to their offense a season ago. This should allow them to be able to play a little bit more through the post, and they're going to need to, because their three-point shooting last year was just absolutely dreadful, but certainly a step in the right direction for them. So I do like that pickup, and this is a solid pickup as well. As you saw, Chandler Cottrell, who was over at Fort Wayne this last season, he was averaging for them 7.5 points, 5.8 boards per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to Elon. For Elon, we can tell that they had a little bit of an identity shift last season with the way that they were playing very much in the post. They were able to do a tremendous job with their rebounding, and I do think that Cottrell is going to be able to come in right away, be able to give this team a bit of versatility. He was able to shoot a few threes last season, only shot about 26% 36% from 3-point range, but still, he was able to give the team about 6 or so rebounds per game, and he was primarily coming in off the bench for the team, but really had a lot more production in conference play. When it came to Horizon League conference play, he was averaging 8.5 points, 7 boards, darn near a steal per contest, and I think that he's going to be able to go in right away, be able to give this team something on the defensive side of things, be able to hit the glass relatively strong as well. So I do like this pickup for them. I also do like this pickup as well because for Cal State Fullerton, their backcourt last year was just absolutely brutal, and bringing in Jefferson De La Cruz Manegro is a step in the right direction. Now, for Fullerton, what they need is a point guard because they had absolutely nobody that could distribute the ball last year. My goodness gracious. How are you a Division I college basketball team with no point guard? But De La Cruz Manegro, though he was only giving out about an assist and a half per contest, he's much more capable of doling out the ball than anyone else on that roster was. 8 seasons ago, he was putting in there 10 points per contest. Okay, 3-point shooter. I'm not going to call it amazing, and they need to add more because this is really the lone guy with Division I college basketball experience that's coming in right now. Yeah, for Fullerton, they have fallen on some tough times, but you know what, being able to have this ad, I do think that is going to be able to help them out quite a bit. So, you know what, you will take it where you can get it if you're this program. And then we saw Terrence Jones, who last year was over at Norfolk State. He was averaging about 6.5 points per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to Manhattan for Manhattan. It's been a little bit of a stagnant offseason for them. I do like what Coach John Gallagher has been building for them overall, but losing the likes of Messiah Gilliard and company in the offseason, that was not necessarily great. And if I'm not mistaken, they should be having Will Cinder back in the fold from 8 seasons ago. Now, Jones is really the lone guy that they've added in the transfer portal thus far, so they're going to need to pick up a little bit more. It's been a little bit of a slow go for them, but you know what? You will certainly take what you're able to get there, and that is going to be able to help them out a little bit more moving forward, and this should be another one that helps out as Charles Chukwu, who is over at Little Rock this past season, he has decided that he is going to be going to Portland State. Now, for Portland State, it's been a little bit, shall we say, hit or miss for them. They were able to do a really nice job on the glass last season. They just did not have a lot on the offensive side of things, so they're looking to be able to really maximize in terms of their low post play for Chukwu. He was not able to get out there on the floor last season as he was dealing with injury and a little bit of off-the-court sort of situation. We last saw him during the 2022-23 season, by the way, over at Tulsa. I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, he spent a little bit of time at the non-divisional level, so this is going to be a little bit more of an upside get rather than anything else, but bringing in a guy with a lot of size to be able to help out, I think that is going to be rock solid for them. And we did see Chukwu, by the way, over at Garden City Community College. He was playing a little bit of junior college basketball when he was down there. He was averaging 7+ rebounds per game, was able to fortify his game just a skoge more. So I do think that there's a little bit of something to be had there. We shall see how much more there is to be had there. And what's there to be had on this podcast is every day looking at this great game of college basketball. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUNet_81. Keep in mind, Larzium, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to Riley Davis of VCheckCBB for joining me in the last segment. And you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once we get them out. Thank you.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.